Dog wisdom stories. Healing my generational wounds of my bloodline and my family system was sharing the teachings that I saw through the family dogs today. Welcome. This is a new playlist on my channel, Heather and Ferri. It's the Animal Wisdom playlist. This is series number 4. And it was important for me to share some of these animal stories. I had worked 18 years in a private trauma healing practice. And I'm speaking out on a lot of podcast interviews about that and my book and my work. And in reflecting on all the family systems and all the experiences I had with healing generational traumas, I realized that I was also hired in to heal animals as well. And they were much, much easier to heal. And I started to sit with the question of why. I've also had some in the last couple years with my father who passed away in 2022. I've had some really deep mystical experiences with animals, as well as I don't feel an animal just comes across the path as a coincidence, just like a podcast or a teacher or a book. So, all of the stories so far are real healing stories. And I want to share that to you. If you're an animal lover, a dog lover, a cat lover, if you're a teacher, if you're a practitioner, if you're somebody that wants to change systems, especially in America, I think there is a lot of value to stories that are true and have a purpose of giving you tools and understandings that we're spending so much time in teaching technology about us, but we're not teaching ourselves about us anymore. We're not teaching our children about the value of a dog or an animal in the household or in the neighborhood. And I think that this is a serious issue. And that's why I wanted to bring it to the table, because I get so much information and love from animals. And also, I wanted to attract in animal lovers, people who are dedicated to taking care of animals and protecting animals, because I know that your heart chakra is opening or opened because of that. But I need to warn you, this is a deep spiritual dive today. I do go into some trauma healing, family issues in regards to the dogs in our system. Now, there's a video about my first dog that gave me something no other human could, which was presence, witness, and unconditional love. But I'm going to go into the other dogs today, roughly 6 dogs, and I'm going to go into the psychology and mirroring that they're playing out that I'm paying attention to. Now, I can't speak about my parents or my brother, but I'm taking notes. And hopefully this inspires you as an animal lover to start paying attention. What is your animal teaching you, sharing with you? Because they're highly intelligent beings. So that's the purpose of this video. Before I start, I wanted to do a prayer though. I want to begin by honoring the souls of the dogs I'm talking about today. I'm speaking about them as lessons that they've brought to the table. Some of them are painful, the first story is. Some are profoundly loving. Wherever these spirits are now, I want you to know I feel deep gratitude for you showing up in my parents' lives. May we remember the sacred role animals play on Mother Earth, and may we treat them with the respect they deserve for the unconditional love they offer us when we allow them to. I also want to say that I'm referencing my mom and dad today because these are their dogs. And if you follow me on my journey in healing generational trauma, especially through the bloodline, there's a lot to unpack. And I want to say that I chose my parents. And there's a lot of hardship and a lot of betrayal and a lot of abuse and a lot of curses And I'm realizing now both of my parents had demonic energies that go back. And for me, it was about healing the roots of the bloodline. So you've got to go back to the roots. And it's not usually just one demon, it's not usually just one program. But I want to say that my parents have been the greatest teacher in giving me a platform now to be a master teacher in healing, a master teacher in unconditional love, a master teacher in forgiveness, and a master teacher in following the teachings of the greats like Jesus Christ. And also understanding for me, because when I looked at my book, that was this book that's on Amazon, that was orchestrated with my father on the other side and really tabooed from the enemies to try to keep me silenced, to try to block my success. That this book was exactly designed the way it needed to be for step one. There are many other sections to this story, but I understand the brilliance of my father now. And I also understand the brilliance of my mother. They're old souls. You might hear that word and think, what does that really mean? It doesn't just mean that they've been around the block in many lives on Mother Earth, because psychopaths could too be from the beginning of time or early on. What makes an old soul, in my definition, is somebody that spiritually grows or evolves to do assignments to help the collective for the greater good. Now, when my father passed, it was really I understood when I started digging in charts and having him, lecture me on the other side, understanding, some of the assignments. But for my mom, I was like, she almost murdered me at age 8 to 9, and she's played this role out as a narcissist psychopath. How can she be an old soul or even evolve for that matter? And what I realized is it depends on the charts of the lives and the journey of the assignments. And nobody can give you that information, but if you work with professionals like myself and have toolkits, not psychics, but toolkits. I'm a psychic. Oh, yeah. But I'm not going to spoon feed you. And anybody that does is not a teacher, is not empowering you to evolve. This next period in Mother Earth, there's going to be drastic changes. And your teachers will have done the work, not doing, but done the work, and have the resume to then teach you tools. It's like an example of, there's a lot of people that write books about manifesting money, but they're really writing books to get you to pay for the book that manifests the money. They don't actually have money. They don't actually have a large sum of money. They only get money through you energetically. So they're not actually teaching you, they're teaching you theories. Do you want to qualify your teachers? You wouldn't want to go to somebody in healing trauma stuff that hadn't had a lot of trauma or reverse things. What toolkit are they using? So our qualifications are going to change drastically as we change systems. And as I have surrendered my ego, deaths many times, many layers, anybody in the healing arts, anybody in the church arts will have to as well. So that's why I say I know that both my mom and my dad are ancient souls. And we were destined for a very specific assignment that was not an easy role for me to play, and they know it. And so within the spiritual warfare, we hear a lot online. In the last 5 years, I understand the roots of them from both mother and father. Very, very complicated, because if we're not passing down our stories, not their stories, but our stories, if we're not passing down pictures, not their pictures, not manipulated pictures, if we're not passing down paintings, portraits of family members, how do we remember? Well, memory is one of my mastery. It's one of the meditations that I talk about in this first book, in my breathwork series, in my creative arts work. Memory is vital, frontal cortex of the brain. Dogs. At each dog I talk about today, you're going to be blown by the spirituality and depth and trauma education they're providing that I'm aware of. Why? Because of my intellect, because of my observations, because of my breaking the boundaries of normal society systems of programming. Leaders read, leaders write. Leaders read autobiographies, by the way. Their children read autobiographies for a reason, to study human psychology. If we're no longer studying each other's human psychology, what are we doing? How are we learning? Are you learning from a robot? What are you learning? Cursive. I have to say, hands down to Denmark. Denmark schools have now banned Chrome's books and cell phones from all schools. No one under the age of 16 can bring any of those devices in. They are going back to reading and holding books and writing in cursive, which creates like over 8,000, 10,000 movements when you do this. This up to 8. That's a dumbed down society. So one of the things my father started having me do is write. Now, I was printing and typing things out, but now in the last 6 months, I have been writing and writing and writing and writing and writing. Do your children write every day in cursive? Are they reading stories about other people's lives and then being asked questions about themselves to engage in knowing thyself? We learn off of the stories, but who's writing the stories and what stories are being handed down to us? This is a deep dive today. It is about dogs and animals, but I have to tell you, this is where I've been led to go to. You know, if you have a dog or a cat, think about, if you have the extra income, of hiring either a photographer, do they even exist anymore in America, or a painter. See, I'm promoting 2 other fields that I'm not even in, and get a portrait of your dog if you love, or your cat, or if you, and you done. Write about them. I'm not saying you have to write a book. Write about, what was it about that animal? How did they help you? What's the relationship like? If that dog is coming, if you're coming home every day depressed and that dog is greeting you with unconditional love and they make you feel better, I would want to remember that energy. I would want to heal, to upgrade, to give back to that energy. I'm going to go into a deep dive after this first story. This first story is, I'm around 38 years old. I've moved back to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I'm right on the tip. God is leading me into doing deep generational trauma work and leading me into a private trauma coaching practice that educates me so much because a lot of my clients end up being doctors, naturopaths, scientists. That wasn't a coincidence. And during this time period, I was still in my parents' life. And I was really blocked and confused about myself. Um, they My mom loved Shelties. So I talk about a Sheltie and I think video too. I'm going to go back to one more Sheltie before this story. So I go to college at Point Park University. And so my mom gets another Sheltie. It's a female. And within 2 years, she has seizures. So she's on medication, her eyes distorted. She's always sick. So she's the opposite of her first dog. She's taking in the trauma energy of my mom and my dad. And I would go home and visit. And I remember holding her the first time she had the tremors, not knowing she was going to be preparing me for what it feels like to have tremors inside, to have involuntary shaking. It's like a tornado. It's like a disruption. And I've had some pretty hardcore shaking because I've been violated severely physically in this life and past lives, as well as my ancestors. You see, when we talk about good and bad, that's a lot going on online. So this is where the spirituality is coming in for my animal lovers. I'm sorry, I just got to go there in the today. So, but when we talk about demons, there's not just one demon. There are demons that are formed through sinning. And then there are demons that are formed through trauma. So when you violate someone, you're giving them a demon in essence. And so for me, healing all of the generational bloodline, there were a lot of different types of demons to clear out. So I just kind of want to give you a scope of this because we are so disconnected. And I do want to say this, and it's funny that I'm talking a lot about God, church, Jesus, healing, because we're talking about dogs and you reverse it, it's God. And if you treat a dog really well, you know they provide so much unconditional love and protection, right? But I'm reading somebody's book right now. I'm researching this pastor I find who's really interesting and outside the box because I think there's going to have to be a completely different type of church existence in America. And it's going to involve real healing. And it's going to involve people taking responsibility of that. And so what's really interesting about this particular pastor that I've been reading about, he went to Haiti, he went into the deep, animal human sacrifice areas. And, the terminology of different words is interesting. I don't know if I agree with all of it, but I am processing and using my own discernment. But what I've gathered from him is when he started his small church, all of the people coming in had demons. And I really, a lot of people are saying 1 out of 4 Americans have demons inside of them. And that's absolutely true, if not more, because of the addiction, the depression, the way I would say over medication has gone. And the more you learn about the type of healings and the things that I've done, which were rooted within my mom and dad, it's really interesting because as he's talking about, well, my assignment is not just to speak certain words to this audience. They're sitting with demons. So we need to address that and not tiptoe around it. And so he started to do that work. And the demons started to come out in people, which makes everybody else uncomfortable, right? So everybody else is like, I don't want to show up for church if this is what we're going to have to face every day, the demon. But the truth is we are facing demons every day. It's like somebody like myself who was victimized and then thrown in the corner. You deal with yourself. The demonic energies took over my family system on that one. That abandonment, that betrayal, it's your problem. You know what I mean? And so it's interesting because even though it wasn't popular and people were criticizing him, he's like, we're going to church and all we're seeing is people having to get rid of demons and it's really hard work and it's dark and why are we going to church then? And he's like, well, why are you coming into my church with demons? It's like why I don't let people in my house. A lot of them have demons. I don't want you in my house. And his issues are the church is not teaching people like, yeah, you may have an addiction, and yet it's really rooted to sexual abuse. If you were sexually abused, you can't just compartmentalize that and say, I forgive. You have a demon in you. And now, how is it acting out? Are you an alcoholic? Are you a sugar addict? You know, from what my understanding of Jesus Christ, he worked with living water in many ways. He would try to use the living water and separate the demon from the human being. Well, if people are drinking forever chemicals all day, who's that feeding? Because demons don't like living water. Demons don't like mother, divine feminine. And so it's interesting to see somebody tackling, and then he's thrown into this particular category, but he's humble enough to know, I don't know anything about physical health. If you're a Christian and you're like 300 pounds, there's something to work on here. If you're a Christian and you can't touch your toes, there's something to work on here. And we're not talking about the physical mainstream fads. When I talk about moving my body and healing it, it goes back to animalistic movements. Watch a cat jump, watch a cat's flexibility, watch animals move and how they shake out trauma because they trust and releasing it. We have been taught to store it, to hide it, to fear it. The biggest thing that I've learned now is the command of the voice and how to use my words. I did not know how to do that because I was almost choked to death, not really by my mother, but by the demonic energies that plagued her and my father. And they are rooted in the church. So it's not a coincidence when I look at the cover of my book, this heart. Of course, we're trying to heal broken hearts. When people come to me, whether there's relationship issues, health issues, mental issues, childhood issues, we're trying to get back to your heart, because if you love Jesus Christ or you love Buddha or you love something higher and good, it has a pure heart. It loves. You'll find out who people really are. People who love money and use people are demonic. People who love people and use money are connected to the purpose that money is a tool that can be used as a weapon or a tool that can be used as healing. And so when I look at this picture, on the feminine side is the red-haired, unconditional love dog. I love my family. I'll do anything for them. And then you look at this side where the strangulations and the almost, screaming at her, these horrific statements to me end at 9 years old. They end. I'm in my confirmation outfit on the masculine side. But my dad didn't do this. My mom did this. Of course, she has the shadow masculine operating, those demonic entities. Where did they come from? Well, they go back. This isn't the first rodeo. This is what healing bloodline means. And it may not happen in the first healing. That's what I love about this pastor too. And I realize now I was on to some things. It doesn't usually happen. These demons are smart. They know how to hide in the body. They know how to play the game. And then they come back and back and back. But I'm learning a lot about the command of the word because my voice was taken from me. It was taken from a lot of the women brutally, like brutally. So there was a lot of fear in using my voice, and that's understandable, but I'm not now. So I use my voice every day to my spiritual counsel. And I use it to those who have tried to hurt me personally. And I use it to clear and hope that they will repent and hope that they will pay their debts and hope that they will change. But I don't have any, I'm not in the spiritual counsel world. There is spiritual courts. You know, a lot of people say there's this place of hell. People are in hell. And if you haven't been, you are so blessed. You are so blessed. But I'm going to tell you, there's hell on earth when you're torturing people, when demons are coming in, when you're being physically abused all the time, sexually abused all the time. But there are spiritual courts. There are other planets. There are other places to go. And the spiritual warfare is very, very real right now on Mother Earth. They've taken away the mother. When you Google, they want you to just call it Earth. It's not Earth. It's Mother Earth. That's the name of this particular planet for a reason. It was radiant with healing waters and rich soil and beautiful trees and animals that were created here for a reason to live here. That berries and apples were formed for us to eat and be prosperous. So that first dog, that the second dog, when I was in college, took on a lot of trauma, was sick all the time. And luckily it was back then where vet costs weren't what they are now. They're so expensive to have an animal sick. And that's why I really wanted to reach out to my animal lovers, because learning holistic stuff like clean water, clean food, clean soil, be an activist, no chemicals sprayed on your lawns, of course. That's going to hurt the bunnies and the rabbit. It's going to hurt everybody. It's hurting your gut. So making animal lovers conscious of the interconnection of it all is important to me. And so, yeah, it was interesting to watch how this particular dog was preparing me for what was going to happen in releasing trauma. And the truth is I'm going to be on a podcast in a couple months with somebody that's really, really interesting who tackles, you know, Parkinson's, MS, even Alzheimer's a little bit. And those are categories that I 100% have a lot to say in healing tools. They wanted to, my family system, in essence, the analytical academics wanted to label me at 40 years old as MS. And I said to this podcast person who also has a nonprofit and organization, I said, if you knew how long and how many hours I shook, you'd be shocked. But I'm better. And I'm healthier than I've ever been, more flexible than I've ever been. My bone structure has completely changed. I mean, from the hips to the ankles to the feet. So there is a way to get this out. And I think there's a way to get out faster. I was just attacked all the time by demons and by tribes. I think if people are protected and they don't go online and they're in isolation and doing their work, it can be a much faster process. But I was telling him that there are sciences. I was telling him about the sacred brain programs that I mentioned. So could that dog have been healed? Of course, looking back, but it was a messenger. It was a mirror of what? What is your animal a mirror of? So the story that I want to go into, I'm 38 years old now, and God's preparing me to go into real, like deep dive trauma work, as well as have a private practice that I'm not even prepared for. And my parents get a small little Sheltie puppy. Now, what was interesting during that time period is that I didn't have any emotional connection to the puppy, which is interesting feedback, because usually I'm really loving and connected to things, and I was over attached at that point to things quickly. I wasn't attached to it. My father loved this little puppy. He held it like a baby. Now, he wasn't like this with the other dogs. He was detached. But this dog, he would put it in the car, drive it places when he was running errands. It was like his baby. And one day we were in the front yard, and my dad has these trees and then these mulch chips around the trees. And she was really tiny. She was trying to get at a mulch chip. And I said, Dad, you're going to have to fence these so she doesn't, choke on that. I literally said, choke on that, not even reflecting back to my childhood. And he fluffed me off. He was like, yeah, yeah. He fluffed me off. I have had an incredible protective system for my clients, not myself. After what I've gone through, especially in the last 2 years, I have it for myself full time. And I trust it now because my dad didn't protect me. My family didn't protect me. But I had to learn specific things to protect myself to move forward into the work that I am destined to do by God, by Jesus Christ, by Archangel Michael. So the next week, I get a phone call, and my mom is hysterical. The puppy choked on a chip. They had to drive it to the vet's hospital, and on the way, it died. Now, I didn't say I told you so or any of that. I would never do that. But I knew that it was trying to mirror to them, this is what could have happened to your daughter. She was almost choked to death. Are you going to face this reality? But they didn't see that. They didn't have studies. They didn't have that they were glued to the television sets. They were glued to somebody else's stories the whole time. And I knew right away what that dog was mirroring. My dad was devastated and didn't want a dog again. He didn't want to talk about it, and he didn't want a dog again. So then I move on to the 2 dogs. I go in and out of my family's life, so I'm trying to think when they came in. I think right after that, my mom really, she really wanted a dog. And she convinced my dad if I get 2 grown dogs from a farm that they've either retired from agility, they'll be trained already. And my dad was like, you can get 2 dogs, but you're taking care of them. Like he was just shut down. And so she got these 2 dogs. One was a boy. We've never had a boy Sheltie. It was black fur. Never had that. And it couldn't succeed in agility contests. It was extremely shy, and it would run to the exit door. It was extremely playful and a good dog. And it was mama's boy. It jumped and sat on my mom's lap all day long, 24/7. Loved mama. The other Sheltie was a few years older. She was very, she was a champion agility in contests. She was very mobile, athletic. And she just had it's kind of like when I walk in a room, I was a professional dancer, the way I stand, the way I hold myself. If you go to the ballet bar 100 times, 1,000 times, you've got some discipline. You respect your body. You understand the way it works. She had that as a dog because she was a champion. And she didn't really take to my mom at all, except at dinner time. She was very excited to get her food, but she was very much kind of programmed to get food. So she would turn around, not joking, excited to get the food. She would gulp the food as fast as possible, and then she'd be like, see ya. And that was actually the way I used to eat. I used to eat really, really fast, So I think that the boy dog was my brother and the girl dog was me. Now, during the process of having them, I was known to bury the family dogs, my brother's dogs with my dad, but I did not bury them because in the process of those years, I left the family system for 7 years. I come back into the family system during COVID, where they have introduced 2 more dogs, Shelties. Very, very different again. One is a female Sheltie, very small, actually, but I'm not gonna say like she was small in size and big in energy. And then they had a rescue Sheltie, a male who had been abused. And it was once again very athletic, fierce. And I could see early on, because I had done all this shadow work, therapy work, I could see the little female was my mom and the masculine dog was my dad, day and night. And for me, spending time with the dogs, or I was given assignments during that time by the Divine Mother. She would wake me up in the middle of the night, go to your parents' house, do this, this, and this. I start to introduce that in this book, especially chapter 8. And my observations of the dog is the female was annoying. Like I really didn't want to be around her. She wanted to lick all day long. Give me energy, energy vampire. I need your energy. I need your energy. Just give me energy. And she would knock him, who was taller and fierce, out of the way. And he let her. I was like, okay. I used to take him into the backyard and they had all these different toys for them, obstacles. It was like an agility land. And he would run so fast and catch, the frisbee and the ball. And I loved watching how athletic and fierce he was. Yet he had severe PTSD. Yet he couldn't really socialize a lot with people. Yet, even with me, he was a bit on guard, but he was much more friendly with me than anybody else. Because I could see the PTSD, I could see the trauma. And every time she would come out, she would once away, like, get him out of the way. I need your energy. And it was draining because it's like almost like it's something to lick, but then it's just like, so that shows you the dynamics of it's right in your face. What's going on with the owners? It's right there. They're showing you full blown. What's interesting about the masculine dog is my dad wanted nothing to do with him because it was a mirror. He couldn't see it. So he just judged it. And he loved the queen bee. She was always on the lap. Give me food, give me food. She loved, give me attention, attention. What type of attention? What type of attention? Right? It's fascinating. My mom tried to be very patient with the masculine dog at this point. She was trying to get it therapy. And God bless her, I mean, it's just interesting. Things were starting to break down and understanding, like, how do we help this patterns? But, it's very, very interesting. When my dad was in the hospital, I've been wanting to get my parents, the water systems. My dad drank water all day long, but it was forever chemicals. And he was very opposite of wanting any type of help from me in the last year and a half of his life. He kept saying, I'm healthy. The doctors say my tests are great. And I knew they weren't great. Like I knew his legs were frozen. I knew he was starting to lose memory. He was actually showing a lot of really serious health issues. And looking at once he was in the hospital and knowing the reality, I was so disgusted with his medical doctors. Yeah, you lost respect. I could list about 25 things of major things that you lost respect on, but I couldn't do anything. He gave his power over to them. He gave his power over and he would not listen to me. Now, it's interesting, at that point in time, my mom was starting to listen to me. And she was noticing, this energy because they're going in past life timelines, right? And when he was in the hospital, we were trying to get him, because isolation is the last thing that his personality needed, right? He's a very social person. Um, I was able to arrange to get the little dog there one day, and she's sitting on his lap, just loving it. And I brought him an article about how dogs are getting diabetes now, dogs, because you're feeding them the same thing you're feeding. They're drinking the same thing you're drinking. And basically showed him this article because I wanted to get them into the water. And he told my mom, I'm okay with it. Get the dogs on the water. Oh my. And then my dad immediately is thinking about everybody else. And he's like, well, why don't you take the dogs so other people can? And that was my wiring. Thinking about everybody else but myself, protecting everybody else but myself. And that was part of the demons that they had assigned in them generationally. And I understand that a lot more now. So it's interesting because these aren't just animals. They're not just living beside you, they're living with you. They feel your nervous system, they absorb your patterns. Some of them don't. Some of them have the ability not to, which is pretty incredible. And they can really show us, if we allow them to, how to heal. So I really commend those that do, like if their dog is reacting or being aggressive, they do get a trainer. I think that's amazing. I would like to also introduce you getting a trainer for yourself, for your health, for your physical health, for your mental health, for your emotional health, and for your spiritual health. So if you're watching this was a deep dive into a lot of generational, but you can see the patternings I'm bringing up. And I am grateful for all of these animals in doing that. These animals provided so much love for my parents, and they needed that. They were burdened with things that they didn't even know or could comprehend at the time. I invite you to notice, go a little deeper in noticing your animals. How do they respond to your stress? How do they respond to your pain or your joy? What do they mirror back to you about your inner world? And I will say this, throughout my trauma practice, some of the motivation of mothers or CEOs coming in to do this hard work, just like this church, they're like, why are you showing us these demons? Like, we came here to just kind of feel good. He's like, sorry, like I got to clean it out. And what's really interesting about what he did is what I started doing. I was teaching what you want to call Kundalini yoga. It wasn't American yoga. It was really understanding the meridians. I'd studied acupuncture for a couple of years. I'd studied to really understand blood flow, breath patterns. I also believe in chanting universal sounds because of voice therapy. But what I started to see was, if I've got two people that are really lower, it's changing the frequency in this room. What do I do every week with this? And that's when I became led to a private practice. There is nothing like private coaching. That's how I became a world record holder. But this church guy was saying, as he was cleaning the people out, and he finally had people in there with no demons, he then had to realize there were new people coming because they were elevating. And as the new people were coming, they had demons. And what was he going to do? He has to protect these people. And so the baptism back in the old days, there was a process. You didn't just go into water, come out, and you're good to go. No, it was a few months. You're going to clean out those demons so that when you go to church, You are actually speaking truth and you are disciplined at home. And when you're not disciplined at home, you are going to speak truth. I need help. I'm constantly lying. I have a demon that's constantly having me lie. I have a demon that's constantly jealous all the time. I have a demon that's constantly lustful all the time. Where is this rooted from? And I like the way he's orchestrating this because that makes more sense to me. It was just like how I started to evolve in my trauma work. I started to qualify my students. You have to do this, this, and this in order to be in front of me. And it was partly to protect me. And it was also to make sure that they were actually wanting to heal. Because the demon, I noticed, loves to come into the healer's room and take and take. That's when I started to say, you're not my client. I could tell it in an interview. You're not my client. This is why I have free playlists. If somebody comes to me and they say, you know what, I did your 2 free breathwork playlists. I would like to hire you as a private coach. Is that possible? I'm going to give them more of a chance. I bought your book. I did some of the questions. They're good. I'm having some issues. Can I be a private coach? I bought your water systems. And after drinking for a month on this water, I'm noticing this, that, oh, you're teachable. That's good. And so my message today to my animal lovers, my dog lovers, is your animals can teach you. And the message today too is you might be an animal lover, a dog lover, but also have some traumas to heal. And so you've been led on this video from your animal today. And be warned, who you're listening to online matters. I was put through a lot of stuff in the last year and a half. And I understand exactly why now, because there are a lot of things online that need to be broken up and released and depleted. You know, that pasture could just follow what all the other pastures are doing. But he's actually doing his calling. And he's understanding there's serious problems here. If you are a Christian, you're constantly having demons in you, that's a problem. If you're a Christian and you're constantly unhealthy, that's a problem. If you're a Christian and you have all this money and you're hoarding it, that's a problem. If you're a Christian and you're broke, that's a problem. Let's solve it. And if I don't know the answers, I'm going to go find them. That's humbleness. And that's where we really are at. Be cautious of who you are listening to online. Do you know your ancestors? Do you know your bloodline? Is your bloodline under attack? By who? I had a lot of church issues in general, very complicated from this life. But I am coming to my own church, which I understand now. I'm using my discernment to navigate. But the one thing I do know is I'm a healer. And so what that means is I may aggravate your demons while you're doing this work. And I'm so glad when I was reading some of his stories and understanding that this isn't a quick fix. It's a fix, but you're going to have to work diligently at it. And that's the change. The leaders that are going to be on the platforms, and what I mean by the platforms, I mean teaching and speaking stories that are real life stories that you can then measure and understand your stories, not theories to make money. And not everything is going to sound good. And not every talk is going to make you feel good. Because maybe you need to get through the darkness to get to the joy. But in the end, it's really about being balanced. This was a deep dive. Dog wisdom stories, healing generational wounds. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for subscribing. I know this is a new playlist, but it's a different type of animal playlist. In the future, I am going to go a little bit deeper into animals and things that have happened that are mystical. Whether you believe it or not, it really doesn't matter. I feel it's important to share in case you start having those experiences. But the key here is that I love animals. Animals are precious. You know, one of the things before my father went into the hospital for 44 days and passed away, my parents, I had helped my mom through sickness. And she thanked me for that. When my dad was dying, I was doing everything I could. The demons were coming at it. It was planned for him to die. My brother was sick at the time, dying. I helped him heal. And I'm grateful that I did that, even though he never really acknowledged it. That's on him to deal with. I would do it again. But what I would say is at the end, it was actually Christmas Day. My parents acknowledged and they really were proud of how much I was a vegan at this point, and not the typical American junk food vegan. And it's hard to be a vegan when you've got glyphosate in your soil and you've got forever chemicals in your water. You know, you don't have a lot of options, but I navigated through a lot of education and I was detoxing all of this stuff. And I just said to them, because my father came from a background of hunting, and I said, if you hunt that animal and you strip it and you cook it and you pray and you thank it for giving up its life, then that's great. But the fact that I ate a lot of meat in my 20s, and I think it fed into the trauma. I think it fed into aggression. I noticed that and detoxing from meat can lower your blood pressure if you have trauma. And so people blame, oh, I don't have protein. It's not the protein that's the issue. It's the trauma. There is another way to get protein that is much more sufficient. And then when I started to study like the world record holders of body lifting, they were all vegans. I was like, well, how can they have so much muscle and so strong and I eat meat? And then I started going down that whole path. Whatever you choose. But in that transition, my parents really honored the fact that I was respecting animals. And, you know, we're in Pittsburgh. It's a meat eating place. Like a lot of restaurants don't have a lot of options for vegans. I mean, they're growing, but so, you know, I would just sit there with my shake or my water and be good. That takes discipline. I wasn't tempted to fit in or to take something that did not feel right to me, because the whole controversy too, and I'm not trying to make anybody who's a meat eater feel bad. It's your own choice. It's your own consciousness. I do think it's something that needs to be sort of looked at a little bit more spiritually, if you are a spiritual person, is that fruit just drops off of a tree and you eat the fruit, but you don't take the whole tree down by the roots. It just keeps replenishing. That's the beauty of plants. But animals have nervous systems. So when you murder them, you are in some ways taking in part of that trauma, in my belief system. And so it's interesting. I had a lot of meat eaters in my practice, especially when I was educating on this, because God's like, let's test this out. Let's test this out. We're going to now give you some clients in this lane. Let's see what you see. And I started to see, you know, their sugar they would feel like sugar would drop because they actually had trauma that needed to come out. Once the trauma came out, it wasn't about the fact that they needed meat for protein or this or that. That could be supplemented in with something that actually made them stronger. And look, to each its own. I used to be extremely sick, obviously over-medicated. I had a blood disorder that I've reversed. But what I will say is I've never felt healthier mentally, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually as I do today. And I am deeply grateful. I'm so grateful for my archangels. I'm so grateful for Jesus Christ. I'm so grateful for Mother Mary and Anna and Father Joseph. I'm so grateful for the higher conscious beings that are good on this planet. I am just so grateful for that. I do not take it for granted any day because of the journey I've been on. So I'm just offering information, having been in the workplace of this and seeing results, positive results. So I'll leave you with that. Thank you so much for joining this. I don't know what the next video is going to be. It may start diving more into healing generational bloodline, but until then, there's a lot of other resources for your animals, water education. I have a water ebook on my website, and the breath work really benefits your animals as well. And so many blessings. Thank you so much, and have a great day.